Welcome to Inflection Points, a podcast about technology and big ideas from the office of the CTO at Extreme Networks. Hi, and welcome to Inflection Points. I'm Carla Guzzetti, and I'm joined by my co-host, Tim Harrison. Tim, hey, what's up?
Hey, Carla. This is the best part of my day. I get to hang out with you and talk about really cool things and big ideas.
That's so charming, but I can assure you it's because of the big ideas, not because we get to hang out, but I'll take it. So Tim and I work for Extreme Networks, which I know, you know who Extreme Networks is.
Of course you do.
Everyone knows who we are. Who are we, Tim?
We are a cloud-managed network infrastructure provider. We build some really great technologies to make sure that you're able to connect to the internet.
Oh, okay. Yeah. When I say that to people, they go, huh? So basically what I mean is you might have enjoyed our Wi-Fi if you've gone to an MLB game or if you've taken in a football game with the NFL. Yeah. We make sure that you hear the announcements on the Jumbotron and that you can surf the web while you're there. So that's what we do. It's pretty cool. I think we should probably tell them exactly what we do and why we're here. Yeah, probably. So I am, like I said, my name's Carla, but I am VP of Strategy. And I also work directly with our Chief Technology Officer. And he's also our Chief Product Officer, Nabil Bukhari. And Tim, what do you do?
What do I do? I'm a director of technology in the office of the CTO. And I think the office of the CTO is something that we should probably explain to people.
Octo.
Oh.
I'm needling you, Tim, because I know you hate that term.
That's
okay.
Right.
So, office of the CTO. Office of the CTO, what we are is we are a group of very smart technical individuals.
And me.
And Tim. We let him in because we like him. Kidding. No. So we are a group of engineers and technical experts and in some cases, less technical experts, like in my case, and then come together. And I think it's fair to say that our mission is to look around corners. We're trying to see what's coming up next that Extreme needs to be thinking about. Do you think that's fair, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking at ways to make sure we understand where the world's going technology-wise and even socially to understand how we can better guide Extreme to solve problems for customers as we go forward. It's a really important way to look at the world, and it's not just about being theoretical. This is actually about practical. How can we see an opportunity, an inflection point, as it were, and right? And how do we take that inflection point and turn it into something that actually changes people's lives? And that's really an important focus for us: is how do we actually every day try and find a way to make sure we make people's lives better.
And the man that has put us on this path and created our team of octos is Nabil Bukhari, who is our Chief Technology Officer and our Chief Product Officer. But when he's with us, he's only thinking about the future and acts more as our CTO. He has been talking about for a few months now. I think he brought it up at Connect, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Connect is our user conference, and we were collecting all of these different ideas together, and Nabil presented his big idea,
which is called the Infinite Enterprise. So, Tim, when I think about the Infinite Enterprise, because I don't have a networking background, I had to really think of an analogy, right? And I'm also a very visual person. So, when I think about networking right now, I kind of think about, and I know it's a little bit of an outdated term in networking, but I think about hub and spoke, right? Because you have the network, which is centralized, and then you've got remote users and people who are accessing it from various lengths. And to me, that kind of reminds me of like a city center, and then you've got a suburb, and then you've got the further out areas. And with the Infinite Enterprise, what we're saying is that we're taking that center, that kind of hub, and we're distributing it so that the weight and the connectivity and the experience that you get in the center is the same that you get everywhere. So what you end up with is an evenly distributed kind of map of stars and individuals, all with their own weighting. So you don't have those clusters anymore. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. The key, of course, is the the hyper individual experience, right? You need to experience your network resources. You need to experience your work life. You need to experience all of those things that you would normally be experiencing through a campus environment or maybe even some remote connectivity as an individual. So all of those services come to you. You are consuming them as if you were in the campus, but you're in Starbucks, or you're out somewhere, roaming about on your phone, or you're at home, right? So being able to have that experience of being your own individual enterprise, and to have your individual enterprise connected to everybody else's individual enterprise, I think is really important. We're at an interesting tipping point due to the pandemic that we're experiencing at the moment, where people have realized that the former model didn't work as well as they expected. Yep. And the experience of having to work and live from the same spot without being able to go to an office or being able to consume the resources in the way they did before has really changed people's minds. And I think the infinite enterprise is a way of addressing that and looking at, how do you, as a person sitting in Starbucks or in some coffee shop or in your own home office, how do you live that experience?
Yeah. And I think not only are we saying that experience is going to come to the individual, it'll be hyper individualized, as you said, but also what we're saying is that we're already in the new normal. And the assertion here with the infinite enterprise is this is what the future is going to be. Now, there are various versions of it. It's either 100%, we're all hyper individualized, we're all in our own little bubbles and are having our experience, or there's some sort of variation of that. It's shades of gray. But we are forever changing. Our assertion is that we're not going back to the way that it was, and that because we've been in this for so long, we are to some degree going to change because the technology is already changing and the demand for that tech to change is here and will be present for at least another 2 calendar years, we think, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And as we get used to the new way of doing business because of the societal change around us because of the pandemic, we will become comfortable with these new ways of working. They become part of us. And as generations change, those younger generations are experiencing it in a different way than perhaps some of us who are a little bit older are experiencing it. And I think that's really key to knowing how that change is going to continue to progress. Because as you said, we're in it, it's happening. As it continues to happen, people are finding new ways to move forward. And that's what's really pushing this individualized experience, because we're all still being kept separate from one another. And we need to have the experience we used to have inside the campus, but at home.
Yeah, Tim, I think you're totally right. And I think it's a big enough idea. And this is what we've decided to do the podcast on, because there's so many implications of this, right? Our motivations change, how we're going to do business changes, society changes. There's so much to talk about. So, but before we get into all of that, and we're going to explore it across the entire series, we're going to first talk to Nabil because, it's his idea. Thank you, Nabil, for coming on the podcast and talking to us about the infinite enterprise. I know this is something that you have been talking about quite a bit and that you've been writing about, and it is an idea that you have formulated and our entire team has been working on. Can you explain and define what you mean by infinite enterprise, and why do you feel it's going to be so important?
Well, thank you, Carla. Thank you, Tim. Thank you for having me here. And you're right. This infinite enterprise is a concept that has been evolving. And I wouldn't say that is just me. I would say that there's a lot more people involved in this. It's almost like a collective thought experiment at this point in time. But let me try and summarize this, because there's a lot of different offshoots that we can meander down. But if you really bring it into a concise boundary of what it is, I would say that infinite enterprise is a reaction that must happen if businesses are going to cater and respond to what is happening out there, namely the COVID pandemic. Now, let me explore a little bit more. Why do they have to respond to this any different than they have responded to any other event in the history? Because this event that we are passing through, which we call as the pandemic, is different than any other event in the history of the mankind. Now, how and why? Very briefly, first, it has happened at a higher speed than anything else in the history of the mankind, even faster than the financial crisis of 2008. It was a while before the impact of it were felt around the globe, but this pandemic is almost real time. Everybody, everywhere, almost within a span of 6 months was impacted by that. So the speed of it. The second one is the spread of it. As I said, everywhere, everybody. I mean, there have been massive events in the history where, it is happening in one part of the society or one part of the world, and there's another part of the world that hasn't really felt its impact. Starting from world wars and stuff, there were areas of the world where it was not felt. But the spread of this event is just unbelievable. It has impacted everybody, everywhere, and every aspect of their life. And this last part is absolutely critical, right? Why? Because every aspect of life, yes, there have been financial crises, but that did not change the way we go to school. That did not change the way we go see our doctor. That did not change the way, for heaven's sake, how we buy toilet paper, right? But this event has impacted every aspect of our life. And the third thing third way in which this event is different is that this is the first time where I very strongly believe that there's a fundamental change in the behavior of the humans, of the society, because we tend to gravitate back to the way things were. After the financial crisis, we went straight back to subprime loans. After, previous pandemics, we went straight back to the way we looked at our health or whatever the case might be. But this one is forcing people and society to change its behavior. So an event that has spread faster and broader and to every aspect of human society than anything else, and causing a fundamental change in behavior. And businesses have now got to cater to that. And that is the genesis of the whole idea behind infinite enterprise.
So that gives us a summary of, how it's brought about the infinite enterprise. But what does it mean when an enterprise is infinite? What break down those words for me? I get what has brought us here, but break down those words.
Just like we summarized the event, how would we summarize the characteristics of the infinite enterprise? Look, I'll take a little step back, a little bit of a background. Most businesses are catering to a society or to a structure that is built around two basic tenets. The first one is that there's always a center and then there's a periphery. Now, what do I mean by that? If you are related to the population, you know that there are centers of population. There are big cities, and then there are like smaller towns, and then there are like people who outlive in villages or what we call in the middle of nowhere, center and periphery. If we talk about healthcare, well, healthcare is at the top of the mind for everybody. But if you think about it, there are big hospitals, and then there's a smaller clinics, and then there are these field clinics where there's like maybe half a doctor and half a nurse out there, center and periphery. If you talk about education, there are big universities, and then there are makeshift schools out there, centers and periphery. And if you look at general enterprises, there are big centers, headquarters, big, massive campuses, especially here, in cities like Toronto and in Bay Area, there's these massive centers, these campuses where the company's culture is developed, company's experience is developed. And then there are people who are working remotely, maybe logging in from, northern Montana, or northern Ontario, or maybe out there on a beach from Thailand, but they are on the periphery and they are logging in. So the concept of center and periphery. And then the flip side of it is the expectation of the experience and the experience itself. The experience and the expectation of the experience at the center is very different. You expect a different experience when you're sitting in the university, and you expect a different experience when you're out in a makeshift school. different experience in a big hospital, different experience in a small clinic, different experience when you're at the headquarters, different experience when you're logging it over a VPN. So these two tenets have been at the core of businesses. The event, as we described this, has fundamentally changed these two bases of businesses. There are no longer going to be centers and periphery because people have gone back to wherever they are. They are living their lives forced to or by choice. They're living their lives in bubbles of one or two. Those bubbles are becoming the new center, and there is no periphery. The center is infinitely distributed. Individualism is now infinite. People are now thinking not in group mentality, but how their circumstances are, what their expectation of the experience is, and what is it that they want. So enterprises are going to now have to cater to this infinite number of individuals that have infinite different variations of expectations and are connected infinitely. I know a lot of emphasis on the word infinite, but I cannot emphasize it enough that this infinite nature is going to change everything about the enterprise. We being the networking people, one of the first things that will change is the way enterprises think about their networks. Rather than big campuses, small branches, or big data centers and people, with their applications out there, it's going to be a lot of infinite number of branches, but each branch is going to be equally important. And those branches might be down to the individual user. So the networks are going to have to become infinitely distributed as well. I know lots of words here, but that's really truly the nature of the infinite enterprise.
So it sounds like what was originally very much a centered and focused on the campus kind of environment is now blown out to being the individual is their own campus effectively, and they have the same requirements that they had previously. They just are now doing it from the periphery, as you say.
Yeah.
What are the obviously COVID is a significant mover here. What other societal factors are happening around this shift that you see that's pushing the pendulum to the infinite enterprise and away from that and potentially staying there? Are there other things that are happening around COVID that are causing this shift?
Yes, Tim, and that's a great question, Tim. Look, this is a lot of people think about, and I don't know, I'm a big fan of this book. In this concept of the black swan. A lot of people have been saying that, look, COVID is a black swan. Nobody could have seen that coming. I beg to differ. Actually, I do insist on differing with it because it was not a black swan. We should have seen it coming. Why and how? Let me just kind of briefly go into it. Look, the society has been changing based on technology massively for the last 10 years and a little bit before that as well. But the last 10, 15, 20 years have been a big shift. In what way? People are becoming more and more connected in more and more different ways, not just, through telecommunication, not just through internet, but through social media, so on and so forth, right? So there's a lot of interconnectivity in the society, number one. Number two, people are already becoming more and more individual. Like social media is a great example of that, where everybody tends to believe that they are the only ones who matter, right? But I won't digress in that direction. But those kind of changes were already happening, right? Individualism has been on the rise even before COVID. Now, in that background, when a pandemic happens, that only accelerates the need of that individualism, because this time the need is based on your security. Maslow's hierarchy. The COVID hit not the intellectual self of the humans, but the basic need for security, pushed them back into that individualism and thus accelerated that whole thing. So there are other phenomena that have been kind of feeding into that as well. Bringing it back to businesses, businesses have been doing this shift of people working from wherever they want to, a little bit, not too much, but they wanted the culture to be more at the center. And now after the COVID, the whole idea is go find the talent wherever it is. But then the question is, if the talent is distributed, how do you have a central culture? That's something to think about. That means you're going to have a culture, a company culture, an enterprise culture that's going to be based on individualism as well. So in short, I could talk about it forever, but in short, there has been a rich feeding ground for these changes. COVID has not just been the accelerator, but it has been that pivot that made it not just real, but in my opinion, permanent.
So let me interject there and just quickly summarize what we're saying here, because what you just said is incredibly powerful. What we're saying is that hyper-individualism will be the future, and that COVID has really been the event to transform this. We were on this path anyway, where you have customized suggestions of, things you might want to purchase, or you're seeing content that you think will be related to other things. So we've started to see personalization and individualism already in some cases. But what you're saying is now your experience and what you have on the periphery would be the same as though you're taking it into the center, and it's almost as if you can craft your own individual experience, and the network is going to be able to do that. But you're saying we're here now where I can get, advertising served to me that might be interest to me, but where you want to get to and what you are describing is far away from where we currently are. And we are still right in the throes of the pandemic. So I'm wondering, what are some of the mile markers to indicate that we are going down this road, that, this is a permanent change. It's not just a blip for a period of time, but that we will be hyper individualized, and the infinite enterprise is something that is going to continue to evolve and remain permanent after this?
Great question, Carla. I'm going to divide it into 3 steps and then respond to them separately, because the first thing that you said is just really critical and just underlines the whole thing, that enterprises have to become infinite in response to hyper individualism. Right? And that's really a very good summarization of this. Now, let me put a finer point on this, because people could be, as you pointed out, we've already been personalizing, right? I mean, yes, you can shop online and we can give you recommendations on that. Yes, you can log in already from your home into your school website. So how is that different than infinite enterprise? Because we've been already doing it, but there is a fundamental change. Up till now, even if you log in and do online shopping, you are virtually coming to a central place, which is the website of the store. If you are logging in to, receive a lecture, you are virtually still coming back to a center, which is the classroom where the lecturer is speaking. But what I'm talking about is essentially taking the school to the student. What does that mean? When you go into the university, it's not just about listening to the lecture. There is a visceral, there's an emotional, there's an intellectual, there is a 360-degree surrounded scenario and environment and experience why you go to the university or to the school or to the college. How do we bring that to every student wherever they are? And while we are doing it, now individualize it for wherever they are. So meet the student literally and figuratively where they are. That is the challenge. That's the new step. That's how the infinite enterprise is different than an online enterprise. Similarly, with hospitals, we are already thinking about remote patient monitoring and stuff like that. But how do you bring the same experience, the same confidence, or the same security feeling of being in a hospital and bring that to wherever the patient is, or wherever the clinician is, or wherever the facilities are? The infinite hospital, the patient is somewhere else, the clinician is somewhere else, and the facilities are somewhere else. Same thing with manufacturing. Right? We have already been talking about, yes, you can get online and you can upload your design and you can get a thing made for you and shipped for you. Yes, we were there. The infinite manufacturing. Infinite manufacturing is where there are micro factories sitting on our desks, giving us the same level of quality, the same level of control as if you were sitting in a factory. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but the key fundamental difference is online enterprise is not the same as infinite enterprise. Now, the last part you mentioned, and I wholeheartedly agree with it, nobody really knows in which direction it'll go, how far it'll go, how much it'll go. This whole thing is still unfolding. But what I strongly believe in, that as businesses, as enterprises, as decision makers, this is a choice in front of us. This is a bet that we need to place, we must place, and this is the biggest bet in front of enterprises today. And how they respond to it now, how they change the way they look at their businesses and their enterprises and how they do business, how they develop networks, what technologies they invest in, how do they invest in their culture, all of those things. What choices they make today is going to determine whether they are going to be one of those businesses that thrive in this new world, or those businesses that are left in the books as business case scenarios, the ones that did not survive. And that's really, truly is the choice in front of us.
That's really extremely powerful. One of the things that caught me was your mention of being 360 degrees surrounded by an experience and having to be able to move that experience to the periphery, to that individual at the edge. How does that affect the culture? Like we've talked a little bit earlier about culture has to change and how do you build those cultures? Do you foresee a way that culture can be built at the periphery? Is there something that you see in your vision that brings us to a different kind of culture? How do we build that hyper individualized culture?
Tim, that's a brilliant question. And look, this is something that I think about quite a bit as somebody that has a very large team that is already pretty distributed around the globe. I already think about how do you make sure that the culture is, number one, representative of everybody, and number two, it caters to everybody, right? So everybody's part of it and everybody can actually experience it at the same time. But how do you do it in the world where every individual is so far away, not just physically, but figuratively as well in their requirements and in their understanding of it? I really believe that the new culture in this infinite society or infinite enterprise, it's going to be the culmination of some of the diversity and inclusion stuff that we've been talking about today. Because a lot of the times, while people talk about really enriching their culture through diversification, what they really mean is take it with a grain of salt. But what I feel most of the times what people think about is that, look, I'm going to tolerate your differences, but in the end, I really want you to become part of the culture. And I want to, whatever color is your preference, wash it with that, right? That's really, truly where it is. But when you take it into this new world, which I believe is happening and will continue to have, and it's a one-time change, as in we are not going to snap back to the old ways. In there, the culture is going to be based on these individuals who are all equal, who are all different. And you will have to develop a culture that takes into account each one of them, takes the best of each one of them, and then works for all of them. I think it is going to be beautiful because it is going to be something that is going to be the culmination of this journey towards diversity and inclusion. I believe in it. That's my hope. And I'm actively going to work towards making that happen.
We're getting close to our time here, but I have one really burning question that I want to end on, we were talking about hyper individualization. You're talking about building almost individual culture so that they exist only in an individual's existence, right? This is a huge push for technology. It's a huge revolution for society. Big question, is it possible?
It is a burning question, Carla, absolutely. But if I could, I would say the question is, how are we going to make it possible? Not if it is possible. It is happening. It is going to happen. The way this event has happened and the circumstances under which this event has happened, this change is happening. It is inevitable. It is unstoppable. And perhaps it is for the best of everybody. Now, the question is, how are we going to make it possible? What choices are we going to make today? In my role, which technologies am I going to invest in? What value proposition are we as Extreme Networks going to bring to our customers? How are we going to share our expertise with them? How are we going to help them on that journey? And that is the question, right? And that's where I feel it is going to be. The way we develop technology, the way we provide technology for consumption, the way our customers are going to consume it, and the way they are going to use it, this all is changing now as we speak. And now the challenge in front of it, us, all of us, is to lead it, not to question it. But that's my opinion about it.
Okay. Well, I mean, Tim, you heard it here. It's up to us to lead it. So we better get busy. I got some work to do. Thank you, Nabil, so much for taking the time to share and break down this major idea. As you know, we're going to be exploring this across the entire series with not only you, but the rest of the Office of the CTO and also special guests that we're going to have come and join the series. I'm really excited to dig into this. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And please do this, because this is a collective thought process. And the more people there are bringing it to the diversity again, the more diverse thoughts that go into it, the better off we'll all be. Really appreciate you having me here. Thank you so much.
Mind blown.
Yeah. Big topic.
Big topic. And also, we've had the privilege of being able to discuss this with Nabil before, but he's added on so much more than even what we've discussed. And I think what really came through loud and strong, which I knew before, logically, but I think it's landed with me emotionally at this point in time, is this is fundamentally going to change how we operate as a result of the pandemic.
Yeah, his insistence on making sure that his point of this is not a black swan, an event that we've not seen before and couldn't be predicted, is not the case, right? We should have seen this coming, and we could have seen this coming, not only from our technological point of view, where we have seen this path from personalization to hyper-individualization, but scientifically and medically, this is a culmination of a lot of things coming together at once. And it is a fundamental change. It actually is changing our society.
Yeah. But I think the one point, though, that is different is how quickly it impacted all of us at the same time, because we have this global connectivity. Everybody was feeling this at the same time. And that is a major piece of differentiation between what has come before and what has happened now. And yeah, that's what makes it completely different.
Very true. Yeah, this is now an expansion of the center of our experience being expanded out to the periphery. So he talked about the center and the periphery, and how the individual's experience is now moving out to the periphery. We are all experiencing that in different ways, but we're having a similar experience in that we're experiencing it in different ways, right? We're all sitting at home in our offices trying to figure out how to have that same sort of centralized enterprise experience, but from maybe our living room or from our home office. So this concept of infinite number of individuals now trying to communicate with another infinite number of individuals is really, really powerful.
Yeah. And also we're at the beginning of it, right? So we're all just sitting in our living rooms trying to having that work experience as though we're in the office in our living room. Right. And then we're in the early days of it. Like, I live on Zoom, but I'm sure there are ways to make it feel more like you're in the office. And that's going to continue to evolve as we're in this for probably at least another calendar year. But I think what struck me about that is that we're at the beginning of it. So now is the time to consider the change, right? Like, nobody wants to be left behind. It feels like if people don't consider this right now, especially businesses, they're going to be the BlackBerry of our time.
As a Canadian, that still holds a lot of power when you say things like that. But fundamentally, we are in the middle of the change. It's happening right now. It's happening all around us. And our needs and our experiences have changed and are informing the things that we ask of our partners, of our businesses, of our local businesses around us. We are all trying to find our way through this, but it is happening. So we have to understand that while it's a fundamental change, we're in the midst of it. So that is something that will inform us as we go forward.
Absolutely. And that's something that we're going to have to keep on talking about throughout the rest of the series of the podcast. I mean, there's so many elements to explore on this. So I'm really looking forward to figuring that out and unpacking more. There's so many questions, so many things I have to ask.
Right. Well, we'll get right to it. Let's get stuck in. Join us on the next episode of Inflection Points, where we'll be discussing how business leaders facing a world of uncertainty can begin to make tough decisions about the future of technology. With us will be Extreme CTO and Chief Product Officer Nabil Bukhari and Alan Kuehler-Amrod, Extreme's Chief Cloud Officer. Don't miss our discussion of the infinite bet.
Thanks for listening to Inflection Points, a podcast about big ideas. For more from us, go to our blog on extremenetworks.com. You can find us at Extreme's LinkedIn page, or you can follow us on Twitter at Extreme Networks.